everybody, welcome into this Photoshop tutorial brought to you, as always, by tutvid.com. It's an early one, and today we're going to talk about 10 features, 10 tips and tricks, whatever you want to say, that I think every graphic designer and probably a lot of UI designers also ought to know about Photoshop. One actually sort of side bonus pro tip is start looking into Adobe XD. It's an amazing tool for building interfaces and websites and just anything like that. It's really, really fast. It's really cool. It's very easy to use. But this is for Photoshop. So 10 things that graphic designers ought to know about Photoshop. Let's kick it off here with number 1. Now, number 1, the first thing we want to talk about, and by the way, I should say that this tutorial is going to assume that you know things about the basics of layers and, filling selections with a color and, creating selections with the simple marquee tools, undoing, working around the user interface, things like that. I want to go just a little bit deeper than that, but still keep things pretty, beginner level, so hopefully nothing will really go over your head. Here in this document, I'm just going to slide this icon over. I just grabbed the Move tool, held down the Shift key, and dragged it to the side like that. I'm going to grab my type tool. That's the text, the little letter T here, standing for text, type, typography, whatever you want to say. And I'm going to click and drag to place a paragraph block of text. Now, within this, I can write whatever I want. I can say like, hey, this is text. And it doesn't look like it's text because the text is so darn small. How do we change it? Well, there's a number of things we can do. We can highlight the text and we can change it right here in this toolbar. We can say, hey, instead of 12 points, what about 72 points? Oh, that's pretty big. I can only go as big as 72 points, so I can actually manually punch in something like 150 points or bigger. I can say 200. Now, I can also change the anti-aliasing, which is like the sharpness of the edge and the way the text is rendered. I'm going to leave it at the default here, which is crisp. You can change the alignment. Now, when you're working with a block of paragraph text, the alignment is going to base its aligning on the side walls of your paragraph box. So left align is going to bump it over to that side, right align is going to bump it over to that side, and center is, well, right down the middle. Now, the little color swatch is, you guessed it, color. So we can change this to like a greenish color, hit OK, and there we go. We've got green. And then there's some other features like text transform here, which can be interesting. You can do things like put your text on an arc. I don't really mess around with that stuff too much. It tends to get a little weird. Some style options, which again can be, we're not going to cover them in this tutorial. I'll put it to you that way. And 3D, which we're also not going to cover. Hit the check icon to commit your text change. Now, you can take your Move tool, drag your text wherever you want it to go. If you want to further edit your text, the best way to do that is up here under Window, Character, and it's the Character panel. Now, the Character panel is a beast. It's got all kinds of stuff. You can choose a new font. We can say, hey, we want to go with like Fat Frank instead of the Novecento that we were using. So we're going to roll with Fat Frank here. And you can change the size of the type. You can say, hey, we need to go to 225 points. The line height, this would have to do with, let's just go in here to our text. And by the way, what I just did was double-clicked on the letter T in my Layers panel. It loads your text up. I'm going to set my selector here between the word is and text and just hit Enter or Return to push text down to another line. Now, there's a very obvious problem here, that being the line height is completely messed up. That's this setting right here. It's only at 20 points. We could set it to auto. You're going to see that's going to fix things for us. But what if we want to pull the text a little closer? Well, you can just manually select something. Like maybe we want to go like, what about 190 points instead? That pulls it pretty nice and close. That looks pretty good. We also have the tracking here, or the kerning of the text. We can widen that up so we can increase the spacing between the letters. That's pretty cool. And you can go above the 200, by the way. You can just manually punch in 550 if you want to do that. That's a little crazy. We're going to go back to just 0. Or no, what did I have? I had it at 20. 20 is, it just gives it a nice little bit of spacing. Then you can change the vertical and horizontal sort of stretch on the text. This can be it's a very unnatural way of working with text. I almost never use it unless there's a font that, maybe wasn't made the best, but for some reason I'm using it for that project and I just need to like squish it down a little bit or something to make it look right. That's when I'll usually go in and adjust that. You also have some cool options down here. The one that I use a lot is this one here. It automatically will capitalize every letter in your text field. So that's pretty cool. You also have like a faux bold and sort of a faux italic effect if the typeface you're using doesn't have an automatic built-in proper bold or italic weight or style. So you can do that. And then you have like your sub and superscripts here where, if you're doing like a, TH for third or first or 11th or something, you can go ahead and do that. Underline, strike through, some different things like that. It's all contained in the character panel. Definitely something I would encourage you to pick up and explore. And now that we've blown 5 minutes talking about the type tool, which I'll grant you can be boring, let's go ahead and talk about masks. Now, masks are one of the most important things you're going to learn about in Photoshop, whether you're a graphic designer, photographer, illustrator, whatever it may be. Masks are so important. Let's take a quick break from this tutorial. I want to let you guys know I'm selling a course over on tutvid.com. This one I call the Advanced Photoshop Tutorial Bundle, and a link just appeared for it up in the corner of the YouTube player, right up there. If you want to pick this up, it just helps support what we're doing here. That tutorial bundle covers all kinds of stuff like curves and changing hair color, a ton of like UI and graphics building, and like a Breaking Bad poster, and creating like an avatar Navi person, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, making like a hipster logo. There's all kinds of stuff. Check out the link of that just appeared up in the top of the tutorial window there, the video window. There's even a link down in the description. If you pick up a copy, it just helps support what we do here, helps me to keep creating more and more of these tutorials. And if you do, pick up a copy, that is. I'm very grateful. If not, keep on watching, because this one is still 100% free. We're going to talk about a simple layer mask. We want to, let's open up our mini player here. We want to go ahead and add this shot of Batman to our little media player, but we want it to only be on the sort of rounded area. You see the area that's going to be the screen. We don't want it to be out here with the like bar and the volume controller. So we do this by, well, we can turn on the Batman layer. I have saved the selection over here as a channel. It's, you know, when you create a selection with like the marquee tool, you can right click in there and choose save selection. That's exactly what I did. And I made a selection of that rounded area. I can go select load selection, and I can load that selection up, selection for player screen, and I can hit OK. And now that I have a selection created, you select the layer which you want to mask, and masking is going to sort of force this little bit of graphic only to appear in the selected area. So it's going to hide all this stuff outside of the screen area. We can go layer, layer mask, reveal selection. So that's going to say, hey, Photoshop, take the selection I've created and just reveal the stuff that's underneath that. You can see everything else goes away. We have this mask. Now, the important thing to know about masks is the white area, as you can see, is the part of the image that I see. The black area is hidden, but I could do something like take the brush tool. I'm going to right-click here and choose just like this 60-pixel hard-edged brush. I can set my foreground color to white, and I can select the layer mask and paint with white, and I can still get the Batman image back. It's still underneath there. It's just covered up with the color black. You can see that's all the area I just painted with white. So when you're working with masks, black is going to cover up, white is going to show, and something like if I give myself like a medium gray here, it's going to like sort of show. It shows it at about 50% opacity. The darker the gray, the more it's going to hide it. The lighter the gray, the more it's going to show it. And solid white shows it at 100% opacity, fully opaque, as you would expect. So layer masks can be incredibly, incredibly important. One of the other masks that you do want to learn about and keep in mind as well is called a clipping mask. I'm going to actually open up another image here for the clipping mask. I've got this tropical scene here. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to open it here with Photoshop. And we're going to create what's called a clipping mask here in this photo when it decides to open. What I'm going to do is, let's say I've created some text. So we just learned about the text tool, right? I'm going to say island. Right, so I'm creating this for this island, and I'm going to make the size huge. So I'm going to make it like, I don't know, 600 points. I want it to be massive, right? And we want this. We want the island photo to just be within our text. Well, there's a really easy way you can do this, and it's with a clipping mask. Let's take our background layer, double-click to unlock it, hit OK, and we're going to drag it above our island text. And then we hold down our Alt-Option key, hover between those two layers. You see that little icon that appears, click. And what's happening is this top image is being masked to just the area within our text. And we can even take that top image, grab the move tool, and move that image around to get just the perfect positioning for whatever the effect is that we're working toward. This effect is particularly useful when you're working on an image, and let's say we're working on this and we have this island text, and we do something like a hue saturation adjustment layer, and we say colorize, we darken, we increase the saturation a bunch, and we make it blue. But wait, we just want that to affect the text. We can just simply clip it to the text layer by hitting Control-Alt-G. That would be Command-Option-G on the Mac, and it's going to create that clipping mask. So now this adjustment layer is only attacking our text layer. If we shut off the text layer, it's not touching the image underneath. So that is just one of the ways you can use clipping masks to your advantage. And the way you could then use a mask is if we were looking at this image and we said, you know what, the sky needs to be a lot darker, we could do like a curves adjustment layer here, make it very dark, something like that. We have this layer mask here. It's all solid white, so the whole image is being affected. We can go Image Adjustments Invert to just fill it with black. Just going to flip the white right to black. We can take our brush tool, right-click, make it huge, make a huge brush, and make it really soft. And we could just paint with white in the sky. And you can, I'm not using a tablet or anything, I'm just using my mouse. But you can see, you can just go over and just paint in that adjustment only in the areas where you want it. And voila, we've taken our curves adjustment and we've kind of restricted to just the sky area with a really, really crappy mask that I painted. But you get the point. Wherever you paint white, you're going to show that effect. And wherever you paint black, you're not going to see it. So that's a layer mask. And then this is your clipping mask. So two very important masks. And masks in general are going to be something you use all the time when you're working in Photoshop. All right, moving on to number 3, we're going to come over here to this flat flags image. I want to talk about guides and rulers and snapping. So your rulers you can bring up by hitting Command or Control R. They're these things right here. If you right-click on one of them, you can change it from pixels to like inches if you're working on a project where inches are very important, or points or picas or millimeters or whatever, a percentage even. I'm going to go back to pixels. You can also bring guides into your image. Let's say we want to line up these little icons here on a guide. So we can drag out a guide. And we can select any one of these icons. So let's Command or Control click on the American flag here. We're going to select the American flag. Everything was selected, so I just had to select it in the Layers panel. And I'm going to drag it down, and I want to place this right on my guideline. But I can't get it exactly there. That's because I don't have snapping turned on. Snapping under here, View, we can choose Snap To, and Snap to Guides is, well, it's not quite checked on. It's got a dash next to it. It's active, but we need to actually activate snapping as a whole. So turn snapping on. When we do that, you can see snap to guide, snap to layer, snap to document bounds. Great. So now with the US flag, I can drag it, and it's going to snap right to my guide. I can Command or Control click the Korean icon flag here. I can drag that right down. We can go with the Japanese flag and drop that right in place. We can go with the German flag. And here, check this out. So you see all these lines that are showing up? They're automatically aligning everything for me. If I bring it over here, it's saying, look, all of your flag icons are 96 pixels apart. What that is something called Smart Guides. And where are they? Show Smart Guides. Right there. There it is. I knew I'd find it. I almost always have this turned on. It's so useful. It's so helpful. It's such a time-saving feature. I absolutely love it. And you can quickly just grab the rest of your icons, line them up, and snap them to this guide. Now, if you want to get rid of a guide, it's pretty easy. You can just grab the guide with your Move tool and drag it off of the canvas, and boom, it disappears. Let's just hide our rulers as well, Command or Control R. Now, another thing you can do with guides, or another way you can work with guides, is choose New Guide Layout. Now, what this is going to do is it allows you to insert a certain number of columns or rows. So if you do something like 2 columns and 2 rows with no gutter, we're not going to add a gutter, it's going to give you a guide right down the very middle of your document. So that's the exact center point in my document. This can be very helpful. Hit OK. And this way, you can find the exact center of your document no matter what size or shape document you're working with. You can find it so fast and easy this way. It's one of the best ways to find the center of your document, in fact. And of course, we could select all of our little flag images here and just drag them and try to snap them as best we can right to the middle of our document, something like that. That looks pretty good. And then I can go View, Show, Guides, and hide those guides if they're just distracting me and getting me in the way. So just like that, we can take a series of icons that are scattered all over the place and quickly snap them to guides and find the center of the document. We can also take a series of objects like this. In fact, I'm going to hit Command F12, or I'm sorry, just F12, to revert my document back to the way it was when I opened it. The hotkey is F12. And what if I want to align all of these in a different sort of way? Well, there are regular alignment and spacing features in Photoshop, and this is the 4th thing we're going to talk about because this is pretty important, really, really useful. We're going to take the US, Korean, and Japanese flag icons and align them all right now. So I'm going to say US, hold down my Shift key, Korean, and Japan. Oh, I got to hold down my Shift key. I was holding down my Caps Lock key. Select all of them, and when you have the Move tool selected, all of these alignment features show up. Now, when I have 3 items selected like this, my items are going to align based upon each other. So if I hit Center Align, they're all going to line up central just like that. Now, if I take like the Japanese flag and I drag it way out over here, but I want equal spacing between all of my objects, I can select all 3 objects again, and I have all these spacing features. So here I can change and set the perfect distribution here, distribute horizontal centers. So I can just space this out perfectly. The Korean flag, bing, pops right to the middle, and all of these are aligned perfectly, and they are all spaced perfectly. So we can do this very quickly here with our flags down here on the bottom as well. So I can select all 3 of them, I can align them, and I can space them just like that. I can grab them, I can bring them up, and just line them up kind of underneath those top flags just like that. Now, if we have all of these flags, and let's say we want to align them to the center of the document, we don't feel like dragging out or setting up guides, there is a good way to do this with aligning as well. Now, because all of these icons are all separate, we can select them all, but if we tell them to align to the center, you can see they're all just going to pile up on top of one another. And if we align, both the vertical and horizontal centers, they just literally stack all one right on top of another. So let's undo that. We don't want to do that. We want them to maintain the position we've given them, but still be able to align to the center of the document. So what we need to do is just group them. So select the US flag layer, hold down Shift, select the Russian flag, Command or Control G to group them. We can just name this flags. And now we can align this group to our document. Well, how do we do that? Because we have the group selected, but the alignment features aren't showing up. What you need to do is create a selection. So in this case, we want to align to our document. So we're going to go select all. It's going to load a selection around our document. This is now the shape, if you will, upon which Photoshop is going to align. So if we say, look, hey, horizontal or vertical centers, boom, the entire group gets dropped to the vertical centers, and then horizontal centers, bam, Command or Control D to deselect, and all of these have been aligned right to the middle. This is an amazing way to work to align shapes and text and just anything that you need to align or space in Photoshop. You select that object and you can align it based upon its sort of neighboring object or multiple neighboring objects, and you space that way. Or you can create a selection and align based upon that selection. So like if we were to create a selection like this and take our group and say, hey, look, group, we want you to be aligned to the top of this selection, grab the move tool, and you would select this icon right here to align to the top. Bam. It's going to take it right up to the top of that selection, and it's just perfect. So that's alignment and spacing in Photoshop. Next up, let's jump back to our mini player here and talk about simple vector graphics, drawing them in Photoshop. So normally you would use Adobe Illustrator to draw your simple vector graphics, and you can't go wrong with Illustrator. Illustrator's a beast. But you can do some vector artwork in Photoshop. And if you must, here's how you do it. You have these tools down here. Really, most of these tools are vector, right? The pen tool is going to draw paths. Type is vector. Your direct selection and path selection tools deal with vector shapes. And then your shape tool itself draws a bunch of vector shapes as long as you have it set to draw either a shape or a path and not pixels. We're going to draw a shape here. And I'm actually going to draw an ellipse because we're going to try to draw this gradient progress bar going around the edge. It's actually not that difficult. Hold down the Shift key and just drag out a circle. And now we're drawing a shape. So this is a vector shape that we've just created. We have a perfect vector shape. Now what we want to do is cut a hole in the middle of it so we can get our sort of donut shape. So we're going to select this shape, and we're going to duplicate the layer by hitting Command or Control J. All right, you can see that I duplicated the layer. Now I'm going to hit Command or Control T to free transform and hold down my Shift and Alt keys, that Shift and Option on the Mac, and just scroll it back. Just size it down a little bit, just kind of like that, and then hit the check icon. So we have two shapes over here in our layers panel. In fact, if I take my path selection tool and I drag over, well, if I just select, I should be able to select both shapes. In fact, I can use my path selection tool here in the toolbar, and I can select either that ellipse or this ellipse. And I can see that there are two individual paths. What I want to do is merge these paths together and then punch a hole using this center shape. So what I'm going to do is over here in my layers panel, select the top layer, hold down Shift, select the bottom layer, and simply hit Command or Control E. It's going to merge both of those shapes together into one shape layer. And now what I can do is just select the path in the middle and come up here to my control bar at the top and choose the Subtract Front Shape. And you can see that the front shape is being used. Whoop, I want to make sure I move both paths at the same time. The front shape is being used to cut a hole in the bottom shape. So we have the beginnings of our colored progress bar. Now, before we actually go and cut this down to size as it is in our player, I just want to show you a couple things. You can quickly change the fill of a vector shape up here in the control bar. And by the way, I've got the path selection tool, which is selecting this, but you get all these options as well when you're just using the regular shape tool. So you can change the fill. We could change it to like a bright blue, right? Or a yellow, something like that. Now, it doesn't quite look yellow because it's underneath a couple things that are darkening it and making it look not so great. There we go. I'll just drag it to the top. You can see it's bright yellow. You can change the color to whatever you want. We're going to go with a blue here, but you can also apply a stroke. So let's say we want to apply a pink stroke to this, and now it's applied the stroke, but it's applied the stroke to the inside of our shape. You can change that by using stroke options. Align. Let's align it to the outside of the shape instead. Boom, there it is. Maybe I don't want it to be 10 pixels. Maybe I want it to be 5 pixels. Simply change it to 5 pixels. There we go. It's great. It's easy. It's so easy to use. And by the way, when you have, this is still very much a live shape, which is why if I drag and adjust just the outer circle, it's going to still be applying that cut, but kind of in real time. So you want to make sure you select both paths and drag them in unison. All right, so now that we've done that, I'm actually going to get rid of the stroke by just selecting stroke and just select the thumbnail with the slash going through it. And we're going to talk about the pen tool. Now, the pen tool, it's a huge tool, but here's a quick and dirty on how to use it. I'm going to use it to draw, I'm going to use it to draw a shape here, and I'm going to just draw some old shape, right? So boom, I just click a bunch of times, I draw a shape. I'm going to delete that shape. Here's what I'm doing. The pen tool works like this. You click and drop an anchor point. You can see where the line is going if you hit your little drop-down menu, your little gear icon, and choose to tick the rubber band option on. And then you click again, it places another anchor point, click again, and then click on your original anchor point, and you've created this sort of angled rectangle. Now, you can create curves with your pen tool by clicking and dragging, and you drag out these tangent handles, and then click and drag and place another point, and you create this curve. Right now, it looks like this wedge because we have assigned a fill to it. If we get rid of that and just give it a stroke, and maybe even a hefty stroke at that, you're going to see exactly what we have. We have this shape, and right now the stroke is still being aligned to the outside. Let's align it to the middle of our path, and you can see that we've got this path that's being drawn, and I can just click and drag to apply more and more path, or lay down more and more path, which is going to be stroked automatically. And when I'm finished, I can just connect it to my original beginning anchor point, and there we go. Now, there's so much to how the pen tool works. I've got a few tutorials on it. I did a 5-part mini tutorial series on how to learn how to use the pen tool. It's an absolute must learn. I highly recommend it. You're going to level up your game as far as graphic design in a hurry by learning how to use the pen tool. But let's talk about using the pen tool to kind of chop this ring down and make it more the shape that we want. So we can do this. Let's make sure we have the ellipse selected, and with the pen tool set to draw a shape, we're going to say, hey, look, pen tool, subtract front shape area, just like what we did before. And then we're going to begin drawing a shape. So we're going to draw it like this, and then draw it over here, and then complete our shape just like that. And we've added to our shape layer, and we've used this path, and if I just grab my move tool and select another layer, you can see it just looks like a straight up piece of vector artwork. And in order to get that color gradation, we can just duplicate the layer styles from that layer. So if I go to player controls and come down to progress bar, right click and choose copy layer style, collapse that player controls, right click on this layer, choose to paste the layer style, you're going to see that we get that nice warm yellow to orange gradient, which is going to now be our new sort of progress bar. And we did it with the vector shape tools and the pen tool to just kind of chop things down and make it exactly how we needed it to be. One thing that's also notable about the pen tool is you can just use it to draw a path, and you might wonder, why would I want to draw a path? Well, the nice thing about just a path, you can see there's no fill, there's no stroke, there's nothing on it, but this is basically an editable selection that you can save. So over here in the paths panel, and if you don't see this, well, let me actually undo what I just did because we still had this set to subtract from the front shape area. We want to just combine shapes or let's create a new path here, and we'll name this path, test or something. And here I can just create, some old path, and this is now going to be saved in my paths panel, the paths panel window paths. And the nice thing about this is I can load it as a selection by just clicking on the path here and hitting Command Return. That would be Control Enter on the PC. Loads it as a selection. If I deselect it, hey, look at that, it's still there. If I decide later on down the road this path needs to be edited and changed, I can grab my direct selection tool, I can select it, and I can drag anchor points wherever I need them to go, and I can have a selection that's saved that you can see it's automatically updating. It's the same path, but we're just changing it here, and now we can Command or Control click on the thumbnail and load it as a selection. So you can Command or Control click the thumbnail, Command Return, that'd be Control Enter on the PC to load it as a selection. One of the other things you can do with a path is if you create like a new blank layer here, and we'll just call this lines, you can, with a path, right-click, and you can fill or stroke the path. So we could stroke the path. We could say, like, hey, yeah, use the brush tool, whatever I last had the brush tool set to with my foreground color, which is that sort of hot pink color, hit OK, and boom, it just stroked the path. Now it's a massive brush, so maybe I just need to size that down to a much smaller brush. And now if I right-click and say stroke the path with the brush tool, you can see it just strokes the path with the brush tool. So there's that, and there's so much more that you can do. I'm just going to delete this lines layer. I'm going to delete the ellipse layer that we created, and I'm also going to come over to my paths, and I'm just going to delete that test path as well. There's so much you can do with paths and vector shapes and the pen tool in Photoshop, vector masks and just advanced selections and so much stuff that it would be impossible to cover it in this tutorial without stretching this thing out to be an hour and a half or more. So let's move on to the 7th thing, and that is smart objects. Smart objects are essential. You just have to know how to use them. Let me give you a quick, brief example of one of the most basic things that a smart object can help you with. Let's grab a very large, hard-edged brush here. I'm going to go like 800 pixels. I want this to be huge. All right, so we just placed a big pink dot on a blank layer, right? So we got this pink dot. If I scale this pink dot down and make it tiny, I mean tiny, and then commit that change, and then I realize, ooh, you know what? I need it to be big again. Command or Control T, size it way back up, and commit that change. You can see that it's the integrity of the circle has been destroyed. So let's undo. Let's take this circle and you know what? I should probably make it even bigger. Well, no, let's be fair here. Let's do this with a smart object. So we convert this to a smart object by right-clicking on the layer, choose Convert to Smart Object, and now Command or Control T. Let's size it way down. Let's make it even smaller than the one we just did. So we're making this like a tiny little dot. Then Command or Control T, and we're going to size this back up. So let's size it right back up. And you can see that the circle still retains its original edge sharpness, and it's actually even bigger than it was when I created it. It's at 148%. If we size it to 100%, it's the same perfect circle that we created. There's absolutely no pixelation. Whereas if we did this with a regular circle, as you just saw, and I scaled it much bigger to emphasize the point, you get a ton of pixelation. So smart objects allow you to sort of lock in graphics, but they also allow you to do things like apply smart filters. So we've got this dot. We can go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and say, yeah, whatever, 15, maybe 70 pixels, right? It's a huge Gaussian blur, and then we realize, you know what? That's way too blurry. Well, we can hit this little drop-down menu, and we have smart filters. And hey, listed right beneath it is Gaussian blur. We can double-click on Gaussian blur and say, you know what? We really just needed like a 3 to 5 pixel blur, 3 pixels. Boom, hit OK. And there we go. We've changed the filter on our object, and we did that because it's a smart object. Or, of course, you can grab smart filters, drag it to the garbage can, and dump the Gaussian blur altogether. That little icon in the corner of the layer, by the way, that means it's a smart object. So check this out. Let's delete our little blob of text. I'm going to take this is text, and I'm going to size it up a little bit. Well, here's actually a kind of a cool type trick that I didn't show you. You see how if I want to size the text up, we're getting the entire paragraph box we drew. I don't want that. So let's right-click on the text layer and choose to convert it to point text. That's going to just work with the lines of text. Now I hit Command or Control T, and it's just that little bit of text that I have. I'm going to size this up, holding down Shift and Alt. That's Shift and Option on the Mac. Enter a return to commit your transformation, and we've got this text. Let's right-click and choose to convert it to a smart object. Now, what's happening when we make a smart object like this? Well, if I double-click on my smart object, notice it's not live text, but if I double-click on my smart object, I open up a new document. This is text.psb. It's a new Photoshop file that's working within this Photoshop file, and you can see in here is our live text layer. So the smart object is kind of just like a gift wrapping that wraps around your layer, packages it up nicely, and one of the cool things about this is if we duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, drag it down here, and then let's say we just, I'm just going to hold down my Alt or Option key and drag out a bajillion different copies of this text, right? We've all these copies. These are all instances of the smart object. So if I go in and the client looks at this and they say, ooh, we really like what you've done. We love the design, but the green is just not right. It needs to be like a vibrant, bright, insane lime green. So I say, all right, this is easy because I use smart objects and I just have all these copies of my original smart object. I can go into any one of these smart objects. Let's choose this one here because it's just, right out there. Double click. Here's our text layer. We can double click on that and change the color of it. So let's change it to a vibrant lime green. Hit OK. Hit the check icon to commit the change. And then you have to save this .psb. Command or Control S. It's going to save it. It's just, it's a temporary file on your computer, so you don't have to find a place to save it. Close it. And all the instances of text have automatically updated. So that's a huge advantage to working with smart objects. Another really helpful thing with smart objects is when you're working on UI. So something like this, I've got multiple artboards, and we're going to talk about artboards in just a second. But I have an artboard up here called colors, and I have two smart objects here. And you can see here, they're smart objects. They've got the smart object icon, color 1 and color 2. Now, I've converted these to smart objects. These are just vector shapes. I took my rectangle tool and I drew these and I set them as, like a carnival yellow and a carnival pink. And this is, some of the features here in our user interface. Well, let's say I send a very complex user interface, 100 screens to a client, and they say, we hate that carnival red. It needs to be like a beach aqua greenish bluish color. Well, I can change it easily by just double clicking here on my smart object. You can see it opens up rectangle5.psb, whatever that is. It's just a vector shape. I can double click on the thumbnail for the vector shape, change the color. Let's make it kind of like an aqua greenish color. Hit OK, save this, close it, and everything within here, not just my green, but everything that I had it affecting, all automatically updates. Just imagine if you have 1,000 little graphics, all of them would update color-wise. And the way I made this work, I'm going to show you here on the form artboard. I'm going to open it up, and if I scroll down here, you can see I just duplicated my smart object. Remember when we duplicated all those smart objects of text and we changed the color of one of them, what happened? All of them changed. So what I did here was I duplicated the smart object. I just dragged it down above that rounded rectangle, and I used a clipping mask. I just clipped it right to that rounded rectangle. There was the original rounded rectangle. I changed the color and I assigned it this color 2. So now anytime color 2 changes, anything that has this color clipped to it is going to change. You can see here, I did the same thing with yellow. I've got it clipped to this group, which is these two little icons here. So if they say, look, we don't want yellow, we want, I don't know, let's try a different color here. I'm just going to double click. Let's go with more of a blue, more of like a professional, blue color. Hit OK, save that .psb, close it, and you can see everything across my entire document has updated to this blue. All because I changed one smart object. So smart objects are incredibly helpful. They can save you so much time, and you really ought to start playing around with them and just kind of exploring them. Now, speaking of smart objects, and before we get into artboards, let's talk about placing graphics. So I'm going to come to my tropical scene here, and I'm going to just delete all these layers we were messing around with, and let's place just some graphic here on top of it. I'm going to go File. You can place an embedded file, which just takes the file from your hard drive and just crushes it right into the PSD, which you're working with, or you can place a linked file, which is going to sort of establish a link between that file on your hard drive and that smart object that's being dropped into your document. Let's work with the place embedded first, and then I'm going to show you a cool trick with place linked. Let's go place embedded, and I'm just going to choose, I don't know, let's just go with these flowers here for a Photoshop tutorial that I was working on. And here we've got these flowers. We just drop them in there, and you can see it's a smart object. So I can just, scale it down, scale it up. I can double click on it to get into it. I can do whatever I want with it. Apply a smart filter, whatever. So that's how you place a graphic, and placing graphics can be immensely helpful if you're working with, files out of Illustrator and all kinds of things like that. You can preserve the vectorness of a .ai file if you place it here in your document as a smart object. Let's talk about placing a linked file. Let's go back to Colorful Switch for a second. I'm going to take the this is text, and let's drag this to a new document. So I'm going to create a new document. This is a really cool, really useful trick. File new, and we're just going to go with a huge document, right? It's massive. It's way too big. Don't worry about that. Let's grab the Colorful Switch text. I'm going to drag it. I'm going to drop it. Well, I'm not going to drop it. I'm going to hold it over this tab, and now I'm going to drop it out here over my document. All right? It's super bright green. It's kind of annoyingly bright green. So let's take this and let's color it maybe, I don't know, something that's a little bit easier to look at. Maybe like a washed out. Yeah, you know what? Actually, kind of like a washed out reddish pink is kind of cool. Make it a little brighter, maybe a little less saturated. Something like that is cool. Go ahead, commit the change, save it, close that smart object. There we go. We've got this as text. Let's get rid of our background layer. So double click on that, and I'm just going to drag it to the garbage. We've got all this transparency around this text. Let's go Image, Trim. And we're going to choose to trim the transparent pixels on top, bottom, left, and right. Hit OK. Boom. Love it. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to save this document here as a PSD. This doesn't even have to be a smart object. In fact, I'm going to right-click on this and choose Rasterize Layer, and I'm going to add a solid color layer above this. Let's maybe make it more of an orange color. Hit OK, and then we're going to use that Command-Option-G, Control-Alt-G to just clip this color to the text layer, all right? So this way we can easily change the color of our text. Let's save this. Command-Shift, Control-Shift-S to save, and I'm just going to save it on my desktop as, I don't know, Smart Linked, something like that. Smart object that's being linked. We can close this PSD, close it down. Let's go back to the tropical scene here, and let's go File, Place Linked, and we're going to choose that Smart Linked from our desktop. Bam. There it is. Looks great. Place it, drop it in here, and there we go. This is text. Now, let's say this is a movie poster for something, and there's another copy of this file, but it's maybe for like Facebook or something. I don't know. So we'll go like image, duplicate, and we're going to say Facebook version. Now, you really should be doing this with an artboard, but we haven't touched on an artboard yet, so I don't want to get too complicated. So we're just going to duplicate this document, and I'm going to take this text. I'm going to drag it over to this part of, maybe I'm going to drag it over to this part of the document. I'm going to downsize a little bit, make it a little bit smaller, something like that. And I'm going to grab my crop tool, and I'm going to crop the entire image. So we're going to crop it down to something that's going to be more like, hey, we're going to share this on Facebook. There we go. So we've got sort of our Facebook version of the image, and then just the original. Now, let's say that we've done this, but we've done it for a Pinterest image and Instagram and 100 different images, and the client says, we hate the orange color that you've selected. Well, what I can do, you can see there's a little link icon here. I can double click, and it's going to open up that smartlinked.psd, and I can change the color. So I can say, all right, you hate the orange? Let's go with a brighter orange just to spite you, right? Let's do something actually that's really, really noticeable. Let's go with a pink, right? We're going to go with pink. Hit OK, and we're going to save this smartlinked.psd and close it. It updates in the Facebook image, but also in the other image where it was linked in. And we could do this, it could be linked into 100 different documents if you wanted. You update that original .psd that I've got sitting out on my desktop. If I could go to desktop, this PSD, if I update that, every file which has that PSD linked into it will automatically be updated across the board as well. So this can be immensely helpful if you're, working with a certain set of graphics for a business card and for letterhead and all kinds of different things. You link them into all these different documents, and when the client wants, the logo color tweaked, you go and you tweak the logo color, and boom, it automatically updates across the business card and the letterhead and the 100 other graphics you've already created for that client. So smart objects, and in this case, the eighth thing that we've been talking about, placing graphics, can be so useful and such a huge time saver for graphic designers in general. An absolute must know. So we're coming down the home stretch. Let's talk about artboards. I'm going to go over here to Smart Objects-Artboards. And what I've done is I've taken this material kit. And by the way, I should have mentioned much earlier on, I've got links for all this stuff in the description of this video. But all of this content came from a website called 365psd.com. A ton of amazing free PSDs you can download and play around with. See this free material UI kit. I've just taken some of these, groups of layers, and I've taken them over to this image and placed them on artboards. Now, when you're doing UI design, let's say you're designing an iPhone app and there's 50 different screens that you need to design, but every screen has like the top bar and the bottom bar with buttons on it and the same background color and all of that stuff. You would probably want to create artboards. So artboards are almost like a cluster of PSDs within one PSD. And you can see in the layers panel, they manifest themselves as these, pseudo layer groups. They're artboards. And within the colors artboard, I have just these two color blocks. And I can take this color block and drag it from this artboard over to like the statistics artboard. And you can see it's off the colors artboard and very much over here in the statistics artboard. I don't want that though. I want it to be back here on the colors artboard because it's one of my colors. So how do you create a new artboard? Well, underneath the move tool here, there is a new tool called the artboard tool, and you can simply draw out a new artboard, and you can see it's created a new one here in the layers panel. It's called artboard. You can double click, name it whatever you want, and well, if I can spell whatever, but you have it there. And you also here have in the properties panel, you can set a width and a height for your artboard in an X and Y position, or you can simply take the artboard and drag it and place it wherever you like it to be within the flow of your document. So that's really nice. You can change the background of that artboard if you so wish, or you can set it to an other color, which would allow you to pick something like a red or something, whatever you wanted to do. I'm going to leave it as white. I'm going to put my properties panel back over here. One of the other cool things about artboards is they have a bunch of presets built in. So the iPhone 6 Plus, Microsoft Surface Pro 3, or they should have Surface Pro 4 soon, MacBook Pro 15, web, medium, large, Apple Watch, all these different things. They have all of these built in, so you can go ahead and start designing these things very quickly and very, very easily, and you can maintain graphics so easily throughout an entire document. You can use smart colors and things like that, so which is sort of like Photoshop's version of global colors if you're used to Adobe Illustrator. And if we want, we can take something like our form, right? We have all of these graphics here on our form. I can just select these, and I can drag them in the layers panel. I can drag them, hold down the Alt key, it's going to duplicate them, and drop them up here on the name it whatever artboard, and it's going to drop them into that artboard anchored on the top left corner just like they are in this artboard. So in theory, they're in the same exact place in the artboard as they are down here. So that's super duper helpful. I'm going to delete that. In fact, we're going to delete the whole name it whatever artboard by just clicking and dragging it down to the trash. We can select the form artboard here, and we can hold down Alt or Option and just duplicate the entire artboard just like that. If we wanted, there was a second sign-in form where maybe they didn't want it to say sign in, they wanted it to say sign up or something, or, new user, ? Something like that. You can do all of that so quickly and so easily. I'm going to delete that artboard. And last but not least, when you select an artboard, you can, here if we just go back to the form artboard, you can select or create a new artboard, the same exact size of that artboard on whatever side you like by using these little plus icons. So there I just created one to the right, I create one to the top, to the top, to the right, to the right. So you can very, very quickly build incredibly complex layouts of, dozens and dozens of artboards, and, lay them out in seconds, name them whatever you like, of course. And, in this case, I could say, hey, you know what, form, we need to copy everything from form. We're going to drag it here, Alt or Option, and drop it up here on artboard 5, all the way up in the top corner. And it's going to drop it up there onto artboard 5, all duplicated, all in place, all aligned just perfectly. If we want to get rid of these artboards, select the bottom artboard, artboard 1, select, hold down Shift and select artboard 9, drag them all to the trash can, boom, they're all gone. You don't have to think about them again. So working with artboards can be just so useful. It's so fast, it's so lightweight, and you can have multiple projects you're working on kind of within one PSD, and that can be really, really helpful and a big time saver. And before we move on to exporting, I do want to touch on a little exporting before we get to the real deal exporting. With artboards, one of the cool things, and one of the things I love most about it is I can build multiple iterations of a graphic or an interface or something, and that I can select, let's just say I want to export all of these artboards, but I want to export them as individual images. I can do that here by going File, Export, and just choose Artboards to Files, and I can just choose where to save it, the name prefix, and basically it's going to take the name prefix and hyphen 01, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. Artboard content only. I can choose to export the selected artboards, include the background in the export. I can choose the file type, from a TIFF to a PNG to a PDF, JPEG, whatever, and then set quality and all the different associated options with different file types will be down here in the options area. And then hit run, and it's going to take each of your artboards and export them as a separate individual image, PDF, PSD, whatever you like. Now let's talk about the last thing, and that is export as. Let's go back to the flat flags layer. I'm going to right click and ungroup these layers. So we have 6 graphics that are here in this document. And let's say I need to export these as icons just for a web project I'm working on. Well, what I can do is number one, I can just go File, Export, Export As, and it's going to allow me to export my entire image as whatever I want, a JPEG, a PNG, a GIF, a SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics. Now notice that whole artboard deal that we had done, the reason that saving artboards as files is useful is because here in Export As, we don't have a PDF feature, for instance, or a TIFF feature. So if you want to export an artboard as a PDF, you would go ahead and use Export Artboards as files. If I wanted to do that here, I could just select all of these and create a new artboard. And by the way, you can right-click and choose Artboards from Layers, and it's going to throw these guys onto an artboard. Hit OK, and now we've got this on an artboard. We can go File, Export, Artboards to Files, and export this as a PDF or whatever we want. I'm going to undo that because I don't need this to be on an artboard. Now, because we just have one layer selected, when we went File, Export, Export As, Adobe Photoshop is treating this as one big image, which it is, but we want to export these 6 icons, or maybe not all 6 of them, just the US flag, the German flag, and the South Korean flag. We want to export those 3 flags as individual PNG files for our website. So I'm going to cancel out of this. Let's select the US flag, Command or Control click the Korean flag, and Command or Control click the German flag. And now I'm going to go File, Export, Export As. And you can see that we get the same exact thing. So what was the point? Well, the point is to show you that you don't go up here to File, Export, Export As if you want to export individual layers. What you want to do is right-click on those layers and choose this Export As. Now when I choose this Export As, you can see I get the Export As dialog box, but I have 3 distinct JPEGs that are going to be exported. I can shift and select all of them and say, no, I want PNG to be exported. I can change the size, the canvas size, if I need to expand the image around. Maybe I need to give it 10 pixels on every side, so I could boost it to 190. Oops. Let's go 190 by 190. Oh, that was the wrong thing to do. 190 by 190. There we go. And if we hate that, we can just hit reset, and we're back to 170 by 170. Great, perfect. We can include copyright and contact info. We can automatically convert it to sRGB. All kinds of things we can do. One of the really cool things we can do is, let's say these are vector graphics and they're for the web or for an app, we can hit the little plus icon and we can export a second version, which we 2x. So instead of 170, these are going to be, 340 pixels by 340 pixels. We can do a third version and we can go 3x if we're working with the really big smartphones. And it's going to save all of these images right out. Boom, 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 boom. So you don't have to go in and manually resize all of your images for retina display and for media query work in web design when you're working with responsive web design. And then you just hit export all. It's going to ask you where you want to save them. You go ahead and save them. Boom, done. It's that easy. Export as is such an amazing exporter for Photoshop, and there's so much you can do with it. Now, speaking of artboards, let's go back to our artboards. We can right-click and choose to export as our artboards here if we just want to quickly save out the artboards as individual JPEGs or PNGs or GIF or SVG files. We can do that as well. So we can just, have all of our images right there. Boom, export as, and it's that quick and easy. In that sense, export as is much faster than export artboards as files. Export artboards as files obviously is just helpful when you want to, export a PDF. You even have artboards right to PDF as an option there. So a lot of different features here in Photoshop in terms of exporting and getting your graphics out. And if you're nostalgic and you miss the good old days, go export, save for web legacy, and you can save out your entire document. And you can see this just has no respect for the artboards or what's going on. It's just going to save out one big old image, and you can choose your JPEG, your PNG 24, your GIF. You can't go wrong with the old save for web dialog box, so near and dear to any Photoshop user's heart that's been using Photoshop for an extended period of time. And it's just old faithful. If something's not working in export as, go back to the old save as, and you can always save out of here. And you got some resizing options and things like that as well. I'm going to hit cancel to cancel out of that. So I think that about wraps it up for this one. Now, are you a graphic designer? Because if so, what's your favorite, most useful feature in Photoshop? What do you use every day? What can't you live without in Photoshop? What's something that you can share with us? Teach me. Maybe I forgot something that I should have added to this video. If so, leave a comment below. Also, leave a little like on this video if you enjoyed it. And make sure you subscribe to my channel so you never miss another one of these videos in the future. So for the 10 tips and tricks, the 10 things that every graphic designer ought to know about Photoshop, at least according to me, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.